future, talk radio will actually educate, inspire, and make you think. The future is now. Topics and music that affect your life from Universal Broadcasting Network. Tune in at ubnradio.com.
Welcome to an amazing installment here of Dr. Judy WTF. We're going to do something a little bit different today, folks. WTF stands for What the Freud, but today it stands for What the Film. Those of you that are fans of the show know that we shrink that tune, which we're going to do a very popular one at the end of the show, so stay tuned. But we're going to do something that we've never done and probably going to do on a little more regular basis, and that's shrink that movie. Today, we are going to shrink a movie that's been around for about a month. It's had a little bit of controversy and is right up our alley. 50 Shades of Grey. Yes, and Dr. Judy will see you now.
And add the 51st shade of gray.
Yes.
And Walt and I went to see the movie together as a homework assignment.
We did. Yes, we did.
And after seeing the movie, we decided, this movie has to be Shrunk. And so today, we're going to throw this up on the mind map and analyze this entire movie from the point of view of the wounds, the reaction to the wound, the encoding of the wound. Walt, can you get the mind map up there, please?
I can.
know that.
The mind map was was actually developed by Dr. Judy about 12 years ago, and she uses it in all of her therapy.
And
those of you that want to see it and are listening to this, you can go to drjudywtf.com, and you can listen to our future and past shows at Stitcher, iTunes, and of course here at ubnradio.com.
And so basically, for those of you who are not familiar with the mind map is a perceptual tool through which you can see what is going on from the point of view of the cause of the problem, and then the dismantling of the problem, and then the paradigm shift into solutions. So basically, this is a from through to model, and it identifies the wounds of childhood, and it identifies our reactions and the encoding into the fiber of our being, which makes up our self-esteem, and then how that gets detonated and defended against, and actually at the end of the journey starts to break us down or break other people around us down. So I thought this movie was particularly interesting because it's so obvious when you will see soon how two people get together and they activate each other's wounds, and then the play out is really, really interesting. I found the movie really, really interesting.
Before Dr. Judy dives in, folks, I want to give you a little, because it's so controversial. Some people are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're talking about the movie. And other people go, well, what's a big deal, right? The book itself was the fastest selling book of all time that actually had some adult content by far. Over 100 million copies have been sold. It's a trilogy of over 1,600 pages and has been translated into 52 different languages. Mm-hmm. The book has just been amazing. As I talked to a friend of mine today, basically, way back we had the romance novels, where he took her and then thrust into her, right? Well, this takes it kind of in a little different level and raises the bar. And the bar's been raised so far that they said that they were in Target.
They were what?
They were in the store Target. And there are 50 Shades of Grey items that are sold at Target. I mean, even a ring ding for your wing ding. And other accoutrements along those lines. Yes, I said a ring ding for your wing ding, okay, for you guys. Mm-hmm. And there will be 2 other movies coming. The movie is the highest grossing movie to date this year. It's done over $525 million. So it's done $500 million in sales. So it's a contend to contend with. Even though some people, because of 50 Shades of Grey, are now using the term hard limit for all the things that they do not want to do. And it's really hit a nerve of what's going on, is what you'll see. It's pretty amazing. The book was written by a woman, E.L. James, Erica Leonard James. It was directed by a woman, and it was written for women. She wrote this in her part-time, basically for her fantasy. She, the director, the writer of the book, really did some forms and really directed this more towards folks that are on the lines of the Twilight series, and it just went viral. You know, there was a book company took it, and it's just been crazy ever since.
Now, as many of you know, the movie is about
Christian Grey. Some people feel he's not very Christian, and Annabelle Steele, who actually has a little bit more steel in her than some believe. And I look at it, just to my own real quick down and dirty take, it's a fish out of water. Christian Grey is a billionaire who likes things a certain way, and Annabelle Steele is just graduated from college and isn't worldly, doesn't know anything about business, just basically has been living in her own world, and was a Virginian. She was a virgin. So one little take, and I know Darcy's going to elaborate, but just kind of put things in perspective, is 50 Shades is about a sexual awakening of Anastasia and the emotional awakening of Christian, and the way these two trajectories intersect and interact and enhance each other.
And just to give a little perspective on it, the movie is about doms and subs, dominatrix and submissives. And for those of you who have been in such relationships, it's not always as ideal as the movie makes it out to be. And I, of course, I've had patients who have suffered from being in this position, pun intended, I suppose. And so, we have when I analyze this movie, I want those of you listening to understand that in no way am I promoting a kind of a relationship or dynamics that is going to demean, devalue, or destroy anybody or harm anybody. And I think that there's a lot in this movie that speaks to much of what we've been talking about, which is that we attract our wounds, and then we form relationships with people that activate our wounds and open up our wounds, and then trigger off core beliefs within ourselves and take, in this case, a very interesting journey. And as Freud, Sigmund Freud, back in the day, talked about the repetition compulsion. And you will see the thread through this movie, as I describe it along the lines of the mind map, how they're trying to repeat something from their original past, from the causal area, the blueprint of the first few years of life that then forms the blueprint of our psyche. And we go into, we as humans go into what Freud called the repetition compulsion, and we do this in order to heal. We do this to have a happier ending. And although the pathway may not look too wonderful or too healing, I think the intention is somewhere in there to undo the damage of the past. And so I want to start by describing these characters and how they fit along the on this mind map, and go right into the wound of Anasthasia without giving too much of the story away. But I guess I'm not going to be able to help but to give some of the story away. So
Spoiler alert!
If you don't want to hear this and you want to save it for the movie or the book, then press the off button. You're welcome to do that. Listen to it later after you see the movie. But I think that hopefully you'll never see this movie the same again after hearing this show. So you have to understand that Anasthasia is a very young woman, and she has what we've talked about a lot on previous shows, quite a narcissistic mother. And this comes up in a certain scene in the movie where she's graduating, and guess who doesn't show up to her graduation for very lame reasons? Do you remember, Walt?
Mom.
Mommy does not show up.
She lives out of state, by the way. But
Yeah.
mom still didn't make the trip.
Didn't make the trip.
No.
And so we talk about the panel one, which is the mother-infant disconnect. So clearly there's a disconnect between her and her mother because you can see how distraught she is by the fact that her mother's not showing up. And so if you think about it carefully, this is a woman who was raised by quite a narcissistic mother, so she's injured on that level, although the father saved her from what I call the double dungeon of darkness and shed some light in her life because Daddy Dearest does show up for the graduation, and he seems like a really nice guy.
And initially he wasn't going to, and he did. Now, those of you that from the double dungeon, just to backtrack a little bit on some Judaisms, is one's inside world is a reflection of the relationship that you did or did not have with mom, and your outer world is a relationship with yourself, whether you didn't or didn't have with dad. And if you didn't have too great a relationship with either one of them, thereby you're in the double dungeon.
Because there's darkness on either end and there's really no place to turn. And if you haven't been nurtured properly, which means from an attachment theory point of view, if you didn't have breastfeeding, eye contact, skin contact, consistency, attunement from your mother or your caregiver or some primary caregiver, if that's all lacking in a very general sense, and that doesn't mean if one is missing, others can't compensate, but if in a very general sense, you haven't really been attuned to, mirrored properly, connected to, then the psychological well-being is compensated. And in this case, I would say that Anasthasia definitely has some injuries along the lines of the narcissistic injury, but she does have a healthy father. So that comes through in the movie also, doesn't it? Her health definitely shines. So
yes, it does.
It definitely does.
And Christian really, Christian wants a submissive, and due to the fact that she had a very solid relationship with her father, even though they were divorced, he gets some surprises.
Okay, so that's Anasthasia. That's her background. So the narcissistic mother, the more or less healthy father. She's a young, beautiful woman, and she's an intelligent woman.
Yes, she is.
And an educated woman. And so she then meets Christian Grey, who is a billionaire. He's an entrepreneur, and he owns many, many, many companies, I believe,
Yes,
and
he does.
buildings.
All at 27 years old, by the way. He's been a very busy boy.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so of course he's really hot, and she's really hot too. Although she comes off as very innocent and sweet, and her hotness doesn't quite come out till later. Would you say, Walt?
Yes,
right?
That is correct.
She looks very sweet at the beginning of the movie. And when they meet, there's an immediate sort of an attraction, and
there's chemistry.
There's chemistry, and so let me give you the backdrop on Christian so you can understand what's sparking here. So Christian was severely abused by a mother who was a heroin addict, and I think by age 4 she died. He had some severe physical abuse, I think cigarette burns.
Correct.
On his body.
Yes.
And so, and he was also sexually abused somewhere in there.
Well, maybe
or seduced.
Well,
or abused, seduced.
Yes, when he was older, but yes.
Okay.
Which kind of led him on the track
he's on. So that's the backdrop. So he was in the double dungeon because he had no father. His mother was a heroin addict. At age 4, she was out of the picture, and then he was just, I don't know what happened to him after that.
Well, he's adopted.
Do you remember?
He became adopted.
Oh, he was adopted.
Yeah, you remember the Dr. Gray? That was his mother. She was.
Yes,
she was
of course.
She was a psychiatrist.
Of course.
So he got adopted into a great family, and it was a little more healthy family.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, they had challenges and dynamics, but yeah, he ended up with a little bit of money in terms of that because we never figured out what Dad did, but Mom was a psychiatrist.
And what's interesting is that this movie kind of follows the philosophy of attachment theory, because even though his parents were more healthy than his adoptive parents were more healthy than his biological parents, you could see that the blueprint was already there. So it's that first few years of life that really sets the stage for our mental health. And so what ensued between them was an activation. I'll call it an activation occurred. So his wound and her wound collided, and her core belief, because she wasn't special in her family, was something, I'll just make it up, and it'll probably be close enough to the character, who's made up anyways. So her core belief was probably something like, I'm not important enough. Okay, so
Correct.
she meets Mr. Important. Okay, and then his core belief is, my goodness, what might be his core belief? His core belief might be something like, I will never be loved. In a deeper sense.
I'm not never be loved, or I'm not worthy of being loved.
Nice, Walt.
I think worthy was in there because just the way he was brought up, what he has very singular tastes, if you will, and obviously he's a little controlling, just to say the least.
And you know what's really interesting is that she's an English major.
Yes,
and she's a romantic.
Very,
and she's
very well read.
Right, and a deep thinker.
Yeah.
And so he's attracted to her intelligence, and he's also attracted to the fact that she pushes back. And that's a very, very important theme in the movie, because we're talking about boundaries. He's pushing her, she's pushing back, she's giving in a little bit, and then she realizes where her boundaries are, and she pushes back, and there's this kind of a dance between them of give and take. And so in essence, Miss narcissistically injured by her mother, who doesn't think she's important enough, and Mr. I'm not, how did you put it? I really liked it.
I'm not lovable.
I'm not lovable. Okay. So what does he do? He shuts down internally. So he puts so to speak, a heart guard on. Okay. And so as his defense mechanism, he uses the defense of not allowing a woman in. So he makes it very, very clear that he doesn't want a relationship. Well,
and he elaborates it on a physical sense as well. I mean, when they start to getting together, he says, I will never sleep with you. You're going to sleep in your room, and, here's your little humble abode, your room, and you can do what you want. And right. I've got my room, and the twain will never meet. We'll interact and do all that, whatever we're going to do during the day. But at nighttime, I'm done. I'm not going to have you deal with it, and I'm not going to deal with it at all. So he even sets a physical boundary in the relationship, which, of course, she tries to sort of chip away at it during the movie, and of course is somewhat successful in accomplishing that. But you're right, he's setting up boundaries, and she's chipping away at him in the sort of the innocent way that she does, and she learns her own boundaries and is willing to test his. And in that respect, he's not used to this kind of woman. He thought she was one other kind of woman. By the way, I've read all 3 books. The first one's actually the most shocking, to be candid. It kind of sets the stage, but all the hoopla is really about the first book. He realizes he's, in some respects, as you've mentioned, he's met his match, and that's another reason why she's so appealing, is because they're in a sense they're more equal than she's more equal to him than all the ones prior to her.
And that's the point, and that's why the play is on, because with the other women we're assuming that he was able to manipulate them, and he was able to kind of dominate them in a way where there was no growth. Okay, with her there was a lot of growth happening on both ends, and so
and he had a lot of predecessors to Miss Steele. And so he's been imprinted, if you will, that, hey, all the ones before are going to act like the ones that are going to be after. And all of a sudden, she breaks the mold.
Right. And so there's this push-pull back and forth, and each one of them is activating each other's core belief. And so he's really, really worried about this one, because for whatever reason, there's a little crack in his system, and he's starting to fall for her.
Well, and
it's scaring the crap out of him.
There's a baby's on him, because early on he goes, I'm not the guy for you, on one hand, but on the other hand, he's going, I can't get you out of my head.
Right. So he's scared to death. He's got his heart guard on, and she is just going after it. And why is she going after it? So let's talk about that for a minute.
Well, so she does, but she doesn't.
But why? Okay, so from a mind map perspective, why is she so interested in a guy that's so shut down? So let's go back to cause. Okay, so what kind of a mother did she have?
Narcissist.
Okay, so was the mother emotionally available?
No.
Okay, so what was she doing? She was
was-
doing a WTF, a repetition principle, by bringing a man into her life or being attracted to a man who was emotionally closed. And so the game is, if I can get you to emotionally open up, then I will heal.
And basically, she's dating her mother.
Yeah, except for the other elements.
Well, there's other
Right.
there's other important parts. As one of the reviewers said, it's got moving parts. But
moving parts. Okay.
but yes, in a sense, the blueprint she's got is mom, and so she ends up with Christian, who's kind of like mom.
So the challenge, the passion play, so to speak, takes place, as most of you all know, in bed and in his special room, which I can't help but to say reminds me of a double dungeon.
Yes, we're sitting there watching the movie, and she goes, "This is a double dungeon."
This is the double dungeon, right?
And the movie and in the books is called The Red Room of Pain, and it's got a lot of red in it. And of course, that's where they play, if you will,
and test boundaries,
and
lots of boundaries.
Test boundaries.
And this movie is full of metaphors, full of
Sure is.
symbolism. There's of course a golden key to the double dungeon.
Yes, there
and
is.
the
Yes,
metaphor
there
is that in some sense he holds the key to her emotional release from her prison, her emotional prison, and she even more so holds the key to the release of his double dungeon,
and his
checkmated psyche.
His emotional prison.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So what's so interesting in this is that they continue this pathway together. And there's this very cool negotiations going on.
Yes, there is.
And I sense that the negotiations is part of this healing process where they're kind of trying to create actually panel number 7, which is interconnection, because I think the soul really does want to get it together. The soul really does want the happy ending and the interconnection, and we're wired to connect. We're wired for love. We've spoken about this before. And so I think that there's that deep yearning to connect, but because of all of these massive psychological injuries, especially Christian's massive psychological and physical injuries, it's really, really scary for him to surrender his heart to this woman, which is why he objectifies her. And why he objectifies women, because as long as he can objectify them, he doesn't have to get entwined with them emotionally, and he can just keep them arm's distance, from him and not get too emotionally involved, and then he gets to be in control, and then he gets to play. Okay, and we see this in life too. We see men who just don't want to get too involved in their women. So what do? They'll have a bevy. Was that, like a stable of women where they may have one woman and then cheat on her, and that cheat is going to protect them from falling too deep into that one woman. And there's heart guards all over the place, and then the participants are the women who don't feel so hot about themselves anyway and have the low self-esteem and don't feel that they're worthy of too much love. And so we could see this on many levels, but in the movie we see an exaggerated form of it, and then we see the play out, the act out of what Christian went through physically and the pain and the suffering that he then does what with? I'll let you, I'm pop quizzing you, Walt. What does he do with his pain and suffering?
Well, he takes it out on her.
Exactly, projects it on her.
Yes, he projects it on her.
Right, and because she wants to understand him, she kind of wants to see what that feels like or what that's like. But she also has her boundaries. And I don't want to spoil the movie for you, so I'm just going to talk more about the idea of where people's boundaries are, and how when you put boundaries up, people have to make choice points, and they have to either grow or they have to grow away from and fall into pathology even harder, and maybe grow away from the healing element and go back down the ladder of life and evolution, psychoevolution, if you will, and then go back down to a lower type of a self-esteem woman.
Are you talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
Yeah, in a sense,
Okay.
yes. In a sense, yes, because in order for us to grow, we have to get out of our comfort zone. We have to stretch the limits. But on the other hand, we can't grow if the limits that are healthily set for us we avoid, and then we just say, no, thank you. We don't want those limits. So then we find something that will satisfy us for the moment, or satisfy our lower evolutionary needs, and not challenge us to grow emotionally, spiritually, if you will, and psychologically. So therefore, there are these choice points. So he can say no thank you to Anasthasia, and just, he's a rich man. He can have 20 hookers a day if he
Right,
wants,
yeah, I
and
mean,
he could pay people all day, all night long to play with him.
Which is interesting because in a truest sense of the word, if we're going to expand on that for a moment, it would be easier for him to do that.
Right.
Because he could find a woman, do whatever he wants to her. She's obviously going to accept whatever's done, receive remuneration, and
Right.
there's no entanglement emotionally at all.
But
it's over, it's finished.
He knows that that's boring.
Well, yeah, well, it is boring.
He's
He
bored.
wants
He's bored with that.
Yeah, he wants a little bit of a challenge.
Right, and he's now found her, and she's interesting. She's interesting because she has boundaries, and so through this entire dynamics, they're playing out all kinds of things, and things are zigzagging in all kinds of directions. You don't quite know who's gonna capitulate to the other.
Well,
Okay.
before you get a little too crazy with what Dr. Judy's alluding to, one reviewer said that of a 2-hour movie, there really was only about 15 minutes of sex.
Only 50 minutes?
15.
Oh, 15 minutes?
15 minutes of sex. So while, the sex and that aspect and the bondage aspect is obviously very upfront and prevalent in the film, there are other, as you've seen, other sub-issues and sub-contexts. Several of viewers have stated that the movie, in terms of how it's interpreted, and the director was a woman, I think I mentioned that as well, who was picked out by the writer of the book.
Interesting. Okay.
Was very visual and was really good with stories and fantasies. So some have felt the movie was better than the book in many ways.
I haven't read the book, but I thought the movie was really interesting.
If you're just tuning in, you are tuning in to Dr. Judy, WTF, here on UBN Radio Network. We're here every Thursday at 8 o'clock Pacific here on UBN Radio. You can catch us on Stitcher and iTunes. I know there's been some issues with iTunes, and also the new website that UBN Radio has popped up, and they are fast and frivolously improving iTunes and the archive of stuff on our here on our station. And we are doing a first time over. We are shrinking a movie. We usually shrink a tune, which we're going to do later, so stay tuned. Don't go anywhere and don't leave town. And we are shrinking a movie. It's our first movie, and we are shrinking 50 Shades of Grey through the mind map system that Dr. Judy has developed.
And if any of you want to learn more about the mind map and the Psychological Healing Center and the work that we're doing to heal human disconnect, you could go to
drjudywtf.com. It's actually linked. So
Thank you.
There's stuff there on peaceful healing dialogue, stuff on mind map, even a little one-page expose on the interpretation and what the different panels, there's 9, what the mind map is.
Right. So I want to talk about boundaries and mental health. So guess who has good boundaries and who doesn't have good boundaries?
Gee.
Gee.
I wonder.
I wonder, right?
As much as he tried to set boundaries, I think she had better boundaries.
So when we have parents that run over our boundaries, when there are instances of sexual, emotional abuse, or neglect, if any of these factors are present in our first few years of life, what happens is our boundaries are not able to form properly, so that when a person comes into our lives that feels familial. Okay, let me give you an example. If someone's been sexually abused or physically abused, they have more tolerance, if you will. They will not put up much resistance to a person who's acting in a familial and familiar way to their family of origin. And so So for them, it doesn't necessarily feel like a violation. It feels like something that they're accustomed to. I use the term with one of my patients, a term called emotional virginity, okay? It's kind of like a hymen, all right? I know it's a terrible metaphor, but you can only be a virgin once. Once that hymen is gone, that's a boundary. And so when that boundary's gone, that's it. So once our boundaries are run over and we don't have the pushback, then we don't have the pushback to reset it. And it takes a lot of work, and it takes therapy, and it takes core work kind of therapy to learn how to put those boundaries up in the first place and respect oneself and recode core beliefs such as I'm not lovable, or I'm not worthy of love, or I'm not important. And that's a lot of the work that we do at the Psychological Healing Center, is actually going into the wound and dismantling this wound and then cleaning it out and recoding the person so that they don't have to be stuck in a repetition cycle. We get them off that track into healing.
Taking a step back from that, we are here. We're not responsible for the part one of our life, right? I mean, one of the big phrases we use, I like, that's Judaism, is childhood is a hostage situation, and meaning that whatever our parents give us and tell us, we're kind of stuck in believing it and accepting it. And even if they want to go somewhere and don't have a babysitter, we're stuck in the car and driving all over town because they can't do it otherwise. So childhood is this hostage situation, and we really aren't responsible for that, even though that is our blueprint and how we begin and lay the foundation of who we are. But we can change that. It's not how you start that matters, it's how you finish. So the second chapter of your life, and you can't rewrite and address and figure out what's going on from the first part by yourself. You have to have help.
Because we have blind spots, and we can know what we know, we can know what we don't know, but we can't know what we don't know what we don't know.
Correct.
And for example, we can know that we know how to speak English. We can know that we don't know how to speak, you name the language, but we don't know something. We can't speak to something that we don't even know. And that's the unconscious. The unconscious is that place where we don't even know why we're acting that way. And that's why, for me, taking people out of psychological hell or prison is so exciting, because I'm basically helping them flash a truth light on these areas of the unknown and make it conscious. So once it's conscious, you have conscious control over it. And so what Anasthasia and what's his name? Christian were doing together is that all of this stuff was unconscious, but the more they played the dynamics in the game, the more they had to think about what they were doing and decide whether they were going to be stuck in their isms, their defense mechanisms, or rise to the occasion and really kind of renegotiate or reshuffle the deck. And by the way, a lot of people are asking me for the Peaceful Healing Dialogue. It's up on my website, and it's under the forms section on top if you're looking for it. So you don't have to look all over the website. There it is, under the forms section.
It's all one page. It's laid out really beautifully.
Right. And so if Anasthasia and Christian were to sit down with this Peaceful Healing Dialogue, right, and now know more about their inner mechanisms, then maybe they can really make a deal that's going to work for both of them. But it's going to be painful, probably more so for Christian, because she demands emotional intimacy, and that is what he runs from most of all. So, by the way, this is a call-in show. I would love to hear from you. We would love to hear from you, so please do feel to call in.
The number to call in if you saw the movie or have comments about it or promise to never see the movie, number is 323-843-2826. 323-843-2826. One of the things I thought in terms of the negotiation process that was during the film was, he finally realized, I think, that she had really put a kink in his armor when, hey, this is a hard limit, if you will. And, I don't know how to love. I'm not a flowers and candy kind of guy. And, we're not going to do all that kind of stuff. And in it, he said, look, I understand where you're coming from, and I'm willing even to bend my hard rule, and we'll go out on a date night 1 night a week, which I thought was kind of the beginning of the fact that, hey, this guy's, even though he's a big negotiator and, a billionaire and usually gets what he wants, and that's the beginning and the end of it, he really is interested in Anasthasia. He really wants to have a relationship with her and realizes in order to get what he wants, he's going to have to give.
And what's also very interesting is that she has other suitors, and she's not that interested in them because, guess why?
They're not Christian.
Well, that's true. They're not multi-billionaires.
Christian Grey, I should say.
But also, they're a little bit more emotionally available and
Yes,
probably
they are.
healthier and probably willing to give her her
More
meet her needs.
emotional connection, and he feels threatened. Yes, he does.
But she doesn't want those emotionally healthy people because she's trying to resurrect something from the past and play it out, which is
Relive her relationship with her mom.
you're getting good. Well,
Yeah. Thank you, doctor.
okay, so for those of you who are listening, understand that that this kind of dynamics can get dangerous. It can cross lines. It can go into abuse and domestic violence.
It sure can. And one article that was brought up, there's a line between dominance and abuse, and 50 Shades of Grey is blurred. And one of the questions which I thought we should touch on is, why do women stay in abusive relationships?
Okay.
That was one of the issues that was brought up.
Okay.
I mean, here she is. She's basically, and it's intimated a lot by a lot of the flack about the film, is she's going into an abusive relationship, and why is she going into it, and why is she staying? Even though in reality it's not really abusive, I don't think.
Well, in general, why do women go into abusive relationships and experience the cycle of violence, which is the activation of an old wound and then a reaction to it, and then through that process they try to hold on to that bond with that abuser at any cost, and then find themselves in a very chaotic world. And then at the end of that journey, they either get beaten up, few of them leave actually, but then they will recycle through that because in essence, it's familial. It's familiar and it's familial, and they're always hoping that somehow by their good behavior, by being a nice codependent, by giving in to the demands of the abuser, who generally will apologize and say he or she will never do it again. And this does not only go for men, it also women abuse men. And then there it goes again. And it's a total WTF. It's a total repetition principle. And in order to break free of this, it's very difficult, because there's makeup sex, okay? So things get really horrific, and then the next thing that you know is they're apologizing to each other. I'll never do it again. They make love. It's amazing, amazing beyond belief. And then the adrenaline and the dopamine and the serotonin and, all those juices start flowing. And if a woman is young and in her menstrual years, then there's that love bond that takes place. And it's kind of like a drug. We've spoken about this. The love bond is really biochemical in nature, and so that a woman in particular has to watch who she bonds with, okay? Because the bond could turn into bondage, as this movie indicates.
Or a baby.
Or a baby,
which means they're bonded to that person forever.
Right. So it, it behooves everybody to get healthy before they enter a relationship, or if you are in a relationship, it behooves the couple to get healthy within the relationship so that they can stop playing this horrific dynamics of hell and break the multi-generational transmission process, fancy word for paying it forward into the future, and then your children will repeat the same kind of damaging dynamics. And so if you're parents and you're in a bad dynamics with each other, it's not the end of the relationship. As a matter of fact, sometimes I find the couples have to come in when they're in crisis, because it's the crisis that drives them to that point where they say, hey, something's got to give. Something has to morph here. And a lot of times they already have children together, and they have money together, and they have businesses together, and so the incentive is there.
It's very tangled.
And then I like to give it a shot with them, and have them commit to at least a 30-day contract of, let's really work on this, and let's relationshift, a word I like to use, out of this pathology, and clean the wounds from the past so that they don't project it on each other. And I think this movie was an amazingly beautiful example of how wound meets wound, activates, detonates, and then the play out is very, very interesting.
It is.
Right.
And from the article about why women stay in abusive relationships, this lady writes, this movie, in terms of the context of this of sorts, is an emotional fantasy, not a sexual one. It explains why 100 million copies of 50 Shades franchise has sold and the buzz over the movie. For some victims, the intoxication of healing a damaged partner is the root of how love blindfolds us while delivering us into danger. We cling fiercely to the seductive idea that we are powerful, smart women, and that we can fix hurt men.
And so by reading the books, by going to the movies, we get to identify with the characters and play out our own emotions, and hope that somewhere in that plot there's some kind of a re-injury, maybe a little bit within our own psyche happens, or a pathway to understanding how we can get out of this, or a kind of an aha moment where we can start looking at boundaries and what works and what doesn't work, what feels good, what's consensual, what's not consensual. So I think a lot of people are drawn to this.
They are.
Obviously. And by the way, I did invite the author to join us, but she declined.
Tactfully declined.
Tactfully declined. And if the producer or the writers of the movie are listening, we tactfully invite you to come on our show.
Anytime.
And let's discuss it, because I think people are interested in the psychology of this. And I think that when we can perceive something maybe with a more deep understanding, then it makes things very interesting for us. And so you're invited. And please do call in.
Yes. A couple of things I thought we'd finish with, then we have to do our song, is a couple of things we can learn from the movie it is. First is sexual experimentation ultimately is a good thing. Be open to experimenting. And be open to new experiences that could change your life. So on that one. Another one is consent is the key, right? You want to understand the importance of consent. You both are on the same page with an enthusiastic hell yes. And ultimately, that's what Christian was trying to do, is to get her to consent and be open and to be on the same page as he, even though it was a gigantic leap from where she started. And obviously, it was a giant leap from where she was as well. So they both kind of had to meet. Know your limits and respect them. She's not a total pushover, as we've said. She's a girl that knows her limits and respects them. And she's very clear about what she wants to do, will do, and won't do. And that surprised him as well.
So the primary thing is safety. You
Yes,
have to
very much
establish
so.
safety,
Very much
and
so.
you have to establish the no. Where the
Yes.
where the yes is and where the no is and where the gray areas are, and so hopefully we shed a little light on the characters, and I thought that this movie was super interesting, and maybe we shed a 51st shade to the 50 Shades of the Gray.
And the last thing here is this movie is a fantasy, okay? This isn't real life. And granted, there are aspects that are part of life that can be, but the bottom line is the book is an escape. It's a fantasy, and so is the movie.
Right. And not everyone who enters into these dom-sub relationships experiences
It doesn't work for everybody.
It doesn't work for everyone, and certainly a lot of people are hurt in these relationships, so we have to really understand that this movie is a fantasy.
And with that, we're going to get back to some reality and Shrink our tune. It actually is from the movie. It's entitled Crazy in Love, and it's sung by, and a lot of in the movie, Beyonce. So I'm going to read the lyrics, and then Dr. Judy's going to interpret the song. I look and stare so deep in your eyes. I touch you more and more every time. When you leave, I'm begging you not to go. Call your name 2 or 3 times in a row. Such a funny thing for me to try and explain how I'm feeling, and my pride is the one to blame. 'Cause I know I don't understand just how your love can be what no one else can.
So I'm going to interpret this from the point of view of Anasthasia, who was narcissistically injured by her mother. And so she needs to stare deeply into Christian's eyes because somewhere in there she's hoping that she's going to find love. And what's happening is on a touch level, she wants him more and more and begging him not to go because obviously she also is afraid of being abandoned. And so there's a desperation, calling his name, an obsessional quality, calling his name 2 or 3 times in a row. And her pride is kind of how I'm feeling, and my pride is the one to blame. In other words, I don't know where her pride is, but she's got a kind of an awareness of it, but she's pushing it aside also a little bit. And this relationship, whatever they're doing, is touching her in places that she's been yearning for a long time.
And the chorus, got me looking so crazy right now, your love. Got me looking so crazy right now. Got me looking so crazy right now, your touch. Got me hoping you'll page me right now, your kiss. Got me hoping you'll save me right now. Looking so crazy is love. Got me looking so crazy in love.
So she wants to be saved. Somehow she wants to convert this person who's completely shut down, and she wants to affirm that she is worthy of being loved. And it's making her crazy because she doesn't know how to get this out of him. And she's going nuts because there's so much pleasure associated with him, and yet there's so much pain associated with him also. That's pretty crazy making.
It certainly is. So then we got, when I talk to my friend so quietly, who he thinks he is. Look at what you've done to me. Tennis shoes. Don't even need to buy me a new dress. You ain't here, ain't nobody else to impress. It's the way you know what I thought I knew. It's the beat that my heart skips when I'm with you. But I still don't understand just how your love can do what no one else can do.
Well, she doesn't really get that she's reenacting this whole thing, so she doesn't understand why she's so drawn to him. But all she knows is that her heart is skipping, and that there's something very, very, very exciting beyond what she can explain by being with him, and she's completely drawn in.
And then we're back to our chorus, and we'll, got me looking so crazy right now. Your love got me looking so crazy right now. Your touch and your kiss. And then the last line, last stanza. Got me looking so crazy right now. Your touch again. You got me so looking so crazy right now. Got me hoping you'll page me right now. Your kiss. Got me hoping you'll save me right now. Looking so crazy is love. Got me looking so crazy in love.
So the desire to connect, please page me, please connect to me. I'm crazy without you. You're going to save me because without you, I feel like I'm maybe not much. So I need you to affirm me. I need you to esteem me. Please don't leave me.
Yes. And that, folks, is our WTF, What the Film, from Dr. Judy, WTF, which is What the Freud.
And if there's a film that you want us to shrink, call
absolutely.
it in, write it in, and let us know, and we'll do it.
You can write us at info, at drjudywtf.com. We're also on Facebook. So if you happen to be near a computer or just listening to us on your smartphone, go to Facebook at Dr. Judy WTF and like us. We'd love to hear from you, and we'd love you to like us. We want you to love us. And this has been our What the Film 50 Shades of Grey here at UBN Radio Network. I'm your host, Walt Lusk, with Dr. Judy Rosenberg. Next week, we're going to have another exciting time, so stay tuned for that, and thanks for listening. And we're going to close out with our song. And God bless everyone, and in the infamous phrase of the movie, laters, baby.